sense of just the beauty of it, but also just the scope and the size of the facilities and space for the students. So they get the best of both worlds that way.
Truly beautiful. It is.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm so excited to join my very good friend, Mrs. Whalen. We've known each other, my goodness, probably since I feel like it's been at least 20 years, Dean.
It has. It's been a long time.
I'm excited to join you. I sure wish we were all in person in the auditorium, enjoying our company together, but this is the best alternative. And I'm really happy that you took some time on an evening in July to learn a little bit more about the college search. Jean, would you like to say any introductory words before we get started?
I just want to thank you, Jen. You do such a fantastic job, and your message is so important today to focus on helping students figure out and identify what do they need. And once they do so, you know, finding that college that meets those needs is a little easier. So thank you, Jen. Thank you.
Well, no, thank you. It's my pleasure. And, you know, every time I do run into a family from Pine Richland, whether I'm in Pittsburgh traveling or they are traveling and visiting the College of Wooster, I remind them how, how much they need to take advantage of your expertise, but how lucky and how fortunate they are to have you in this targeted role to support them through the process. So between the two of us, it's a good team, and we're here to help all of you tonight. So thank you. So before we get started, I did want to just share that we would love for our audience to use the Q&A section, or Q&A function, I should say, on the Zoom. I know many of you probably are pretty comfortable with Zoom these days, but if you are not as comfortable, keep in mind this is what it looks like on your laptop, and on the right side you'll see what it looks like on your phone, depending on what you're using this evening. So you can click on that, and that should bring up a box that allows you to ask questions to us. We're going to leave plenty of time at the end to answer questions, but I'm also really lucky to have Mrs. Whalen on the call, as well as one of my colleagues, Molly Conley from the College of Wooster. And so they will also try to answer many of the questions that you have throughout the session by typing if we don't address it live. I also want to mention that we would like to record this evening's session because we know many of your friends maybe didn't have a chance to log in this evening, and we want to make sure that this is available online. And so Mrs. Whalen's going to post it once we're finished. So just wanted to make sure everybody knew we were being recorded as well. All right, so let's get started. So if we were in person, one of my favorite ways to kick off this conversation is simply to look around the room and see all of the different families, because typically, the child is next to the mother or father, and either look like they are not very interested in being there, or very interested in learning and anxious about learning about the process. And I like to say, okay, I'm going to put a word on the screen, and I want you to think of the first word or the first phrase that comes to mind when you see that. And so I'm going to put it out there. I know we can't interact or engage in the same way, but if you're sitting here together, or if you have a chance to talk with your child or talk with your parents after this, I think it's a great exercise, because when you think about that first word or phrase that comes to mind when you hear the word college, I think it also is very telling about how you feel about the process and what's most important to you. And even more important is to understand maybe what the other person in the room is thinking. So are you and your parents on the same page in terms of what's important to you, or perhaps what's bothering you or making you anxious about the process? And so some fun answers that I typically get is money or expensive, and that's usually coming from the family member. And then the student may say freedom or excitement or activity. Many folks will talk about investment or degree or career. And so it's really fun to it helps to at least start the conversation about what those priorities are. I also know that sometimes it can be difficult to do some reflection and some sort of self-assessment, but I think when you approach the college search, you have to take time to do that. So really asking the question, why do I want to go to college? What is it that's driving that in my mind? What, what is that end result? What do I hope to get out of the experience? But also, what am I most excited about? What am I looking forward to? But what am I also hesitant about? What am I worried about? What do I think that I might need a little bit more support as I go through this process? But perhaps when I'm at college, how will I need support? Who will help me? What mentoring will I need to be successful? And asking these questions will help you and your family communicate a little bit more clearly, but also to answer those questions helps Mrs. Whalen help navigate through that process as well, to really think about what are those end goals, what ultimately are you looking for? And then that self-assessment continues when you think about who you are as a person and where is your happy place in the classroom. Do you find that you are most engaged when you have a chance to talk and be a part of the conversation and actually, be part of the learning process? Are you just as fine and just as engaged when you're sitting back more passively and not participating and just taking notes? Thinking about, those ways that you enjoy learning, who your favorite teachers are and why they are. That's going to help you start to really formulate in your mind, what kind of academic environment am I going to do best with when I look at college? And that ultimately ends up, having you narrow the list a little bit in terms of the size and scope of that college as well, but also what is that college's emphasis and what is its mission? Is it mentoring? Is it that connection between faculty members? Are they full-time faculty members versus having just mostly teaching assistants, looking for that quality of teaching? So thinking about what environment, what classes you've had in high school and where you've thrived most, that's going to help you, really position yourself well, thinking about what types of schools are going to be a good fit for you. Also, you may be completely undecided and have no idea what the next steps are in terms of a career and even maybe what you want to study in college, and that's okay. There are many, many schools out there that we don't care when you apply to us what you want to study yet. But there are some schools that do. And so if you are less decisive, if you want to have a little bit more flexibility, there's a group of schools out there that will give you that time and flexibility, where others may want to know a little bit more about what your plans are, and applying to those schools will have a particular time frame and process. So understanding a little bit more about your educational career goals, as well as what interests that you have at this time, will help navigate that too. And then really, taking some time and thinking, what am I very good at? What are my strengths? What am I most proud of? And then what are some of the things I need to work on? And I ask these questions, or I ask you to think about these questions, because that's going to help you when you have to represent yourself in an essay or short answer for scholarship opportunities, or in an interview, because those conversations are going to come up in terms of what you're most proud of, when you perhaps maybe dealt with failure and what you learned from that. So starting to think about some of those experiences in your life that have really shaped you, and things that you're very good at and things that you continue to work on will be brought up in that process and will be good to think about now. Obviously, that continues with what interests you most and activities. Thinking about, when you are going to represent yourself in an application as well as potentially an interview, what helps me stand out from the crowd? And it doesn't have to be this incredible, story of climbing the mountain or the best football game ever. It's really just, what do you think makes you you? What are you most proud of? And being able to formulate that either in writing or in person would be very helpful. So these questions, or the answers to these questions, will certainly help you with that part of the process as well, and help you start to really think about the environment that you want to be a part of, and that journey in the college environment, what's going to be most important to you. Okay, so let's talk about, where do you even begin? Because I know that we have some folks on the call tonight that Maybe you've already had a chance to visit college campuses, you've narrowed down your list, where there are others that haven't even begun to think about the process. So we know that there's many across the spectrum, and it's important to know that no matter where you are at this point, you still have plenty of time to get to a point where you're very confident about that decision. There's plenty of time ahead of you. But where do you start? So whether you're a freshman on the call or a junior on the call and looking into your senior year, it's always important to never look away from the importance of your academic plan. Taking time to really think about those next steps and looking ahead. So if we have some sophomore families on the call, looking ahead at what the options are as a junior and a senior, and helping to plan ahead with Mrs. Whalen and with your guidance counselors, and thinking about where do you see yourself as a senior, and helping you to really provide the opportunities, maybe even some academic risk to really grow and to be able to share those stories of growth in the classroom, but certainly looking for an upward trend and trajectory in both rigor and in performance. So that academic plan is always core to what you're doing. And it's always important to stay focused on that academic plan too, in terms of just staying focused on your studies and doing well. So that's the most important thing. We also want you to find time, make time to have some balance in your life. So that also affects the decisions you make about your academic plan. What's important to you to stay healthy and to stay happy, whether that's athletics or music or drama and theater or community service or church, and your place of worship, whatever it may be that where you like to spend your time and how you want to be involved, that's going to be important. But I also think it's imperative for you to know, because I think your generation has a lot of pressure to just keep adding activities and to feel this pressure to have a list or an activities resume as part of your application. And there are students out there that I think really thrive on that multitasking and can do that very well and are happy doing it. That's great. We have those students at Wooster. But we also have the students at Wooster and at other schools that there may be 1, 2, or 3 different activities that they've explored and really enjoyed through their high school experience and had an opportunity to grow both in breadth and depth in those experiences, particularly in leadership opportunities or making an impact on programming or a difference in that organization. So know that it's really about the quality of the experience and not the quantity. A quick story, one year I was at the Pittsburgh NACAC Fair in downtown Pittsburgh, and I had a mother and son team come up to the table and we started talking about his activities, and he mentioned student government. And I said, oh, student government in college is completely different. There's wonderful ways to get involved in curricular changes and hiring of faculty and really making an impact on the student experience. And he was just kind of looking around, sort of unengaged. And I said, does that sound interesting to you? And he's like, I'm just doing student government, so it looks good on my resume. And of course, his mother was like, and I said, I really appreciate your honesty. You probably don't want to tell anyone else that today that you talk with. But I do think it's, really transparent of, I think, what students are feeling, this idea of just having to add. And so know that colleges would rather hear the story behind why and what you've done to make a difference than just seeing that list of activities. And then I know it's kind of a silly piece of advice, but I always say, look for the people around you that you really admire and respect. Maybe that's your pediatrician or your neighbor down the street or someone, that works at Pine Richland or is a teacher in your school, and ask them about their own journey and their own academic experiences. If they went to college, where did they go? What was their experience like? And then, of course, you have many friends that probably have already just finished their first year of college or have had experiences the last couple of years, and you can hear about theirs. Those referrals are not, they shouldn't drive your decision, but they can certainly be a starting point to at least help you start to explore. And then I always say, start with a map. Go on your phone and just search for nearby colleges and universities and start to widen that radius. Because when I think of Pittsburgh alone and just within, a 3-hour radius, or even if you go a little bit further to 4 or 5, you have some incredible choices in driving distance from your home. And so I always say, if you're not sure where to begin, it's okay to start in your backyard, whether you're at that point where you're like, yeah, I really don't want to go that far away from home. I'm going to look just within a couple hours drive, or heck no, I want to go really far away. It's okay to still start with your backyard, because just in your backyard alone, you have Oakland, where you have University of Pittsburgh or Carnegie Mellon to visit and get a gauge of what that environment would feel like. Or you can head south to Washington and Jefferson, or north to Allegheny College, or hey, you can head west and visit the College of Wooster. We're just about 3 hours away from home. And so it's good to take advantage of those schools in your backyard to just get a sense of the type of community and test those out as best as you can. Now, we're going to talk in a little bit how that might feel a little differently this fall with what's happening with the pandemic and staying safe. But knowing that, you know, many college campuses are opening up to some safe visits. So we'll talk more about that in a minute. But there is research that shows that the majority of students typically don't go more than 3 hours away from home to college. So we know that there are outliers out there, but that is what research shows. Now, of course, you have all of these wonderful free resources at your fingertips. And I do think that that's one of the most important messages for tonight. You have a wonderful director of career and college counseling in your back pocket here in Pine Richland. And then you have all of these wonderful websites. And so the idea of paying someone to help you through the college search, I know that might work for some families that may have unique circumstances, but generally, I want you to know that we're all here to help you and support you, and there are great resources out there to make this a free process and not something that you have to invest a lot of money into doing. So one of those services is Pine Richland decided to invest in Naviance, and Naviance is a great tool. And you can really do your college search within Naviance and that alone if you wanted to, with consultation with Mrs. Whalen. And so please take advantage of that tool. You know, each of the colleges has their own profiles in there. You can get an idea of past applicants from Pine Richland at that school and where they sat with their GPA and their test scores and understanding the decisions behind those. It really gives you some great tools to use to navigate and to do that search. If you wanted to go beyond that, here are some of my favorite sites. So I wanted to make sure that you saw them. And I'll just mention one or two. The College Board website, and of course we know College Board for the SAT or the PSAT, but they have a great free resource site called Big Future. And so Mrs. Whalen, I see you doing a thumbs up, so you like it as well. I think it is incredibly comprehensive. It uses the common data set and IPEDS data, so true data, not just somebody telling you a particular statistic. And it allows you to do a college search where you enter certain qualities or characteristics that are important to you at this point, and it'll provide a neutral list of schools that you can then do some comparisons and look at them side by side. And so I really do like the College Board because it is such a neutral site, but also very comprehensive. The others that are mentioned here, some schools will pay to have more of a bigger presence on them or to connect with you in different ways. So Wooster, for instance, is a partner of CAPEX. I will say CAPEX is one of my favorite because it has a scholarship search on it, as well as a college search mechanism on it. And once you create your own profile, the schools will come to you and say, oh, you sound like you would be a good match for me. So would you like to learn more about Worcester, or would you like to learn more about Denison or Washington and Jefferson, or whatever it may be? And if you choose not to, then we'll leave you alone. But if you choose to say, yes, I'd like to connect, we'll start to connect with you and talk with you. So that's a very good resource for both scholarships and for the search. And then I do have to mention for those families that are nervous about the testing process, I know that it was sort of thrown out of whack this spring with how we all had to handle a new schedule and canceled test sites. So it's going to be different everywhere across the country. But we know that many students may be looking for schools that are test optional, that gives you the choice to submit and have your test scores be a part of the evaluation, or those schools that provide the option of not doing that. So Wooster is one of those, but a great website that gives you a comprehensive view of all of those schools is fairtest.org. So I definitely recommend that as well. And then my last bullet on this slide is the college search. You could spend hours on these different sites, but my recommendation, no matter where you are in the process right now, but certainly if you're a sophomore going into your junior year, I look at the college search as like an elective course. You know, you might have homework 2-3 times a week, if that, to prepare for class the next day. It's not an everyday thing. And so if you spend an hour, maybe 2 a week, thinking or doing something related to your college search, you are going to be in fine shape where you're not feeling stressed at all by the time that you're entering into your fall of your senior year and looking at application deadlines that are coming into play. So I always say 1 to 2 hours a week, spend some time on these sites, on the different individual college sites, making sure you're letting us know when you're interested, looking a little bit more into scholarship searches, those types of activities that we'll talk about. I would spend about an hour a week. And I know it's hard, but you want to stay as organized as possible and come up with a system with your family that works best for you. If you've already taken one of the practice tests or done a survey in one of your language arts or English courses, it's very likely you've already started to receive a lot of mail or email from different colleges and universities, and maybe many that you've never heard from before or heard of before. So you're going to want to create a system that makes sense for you. I think first and foremost, you probably want to create an email address or an email account that is dedicated to your college search. If you're really good about going into your personal one and being able to organize your inbox, great. But if you want one that's dedicated to just getting information and messages that you should be reading, you shouldn't ignore them, should be reading from the different colleges, I would create an email just for that purpose. And sometimes parents then share that email address, but not necessarily, you don't have to do that. And then as you get that communication, if there's a school that you're not interested in, let that school know. Unsubscribe. Email them and let them know you're no longer interested if there's not an unsubscribe link, although they should have that. Because we would rather know now versus later that you're not interested and save those resources and time as well. So don't hesitate to have that exchange, letting us know that you're not interested, but most importantly, letting us know when you're interested. So when you read an email and it's a school that you're interested in or you're intrigued by, make sure you're responding in some way. There's usually a link to click or a form to complete. That's an opportunity for you to demonstrate that interest that in the end will play a role in the overall process. And then as you can see, creating a timeline, so you may have your own calendar in the cloud that you and your family will share, or if you're still like me and like a paper calendar on the fridge, whatever works for your family, you'll want to create a calendar with important dates, particularly when you get down to the point where you're applying to schools. And as you can see, I'm recommending that group of schools that you ultimately apply to is anywhere between 6 to 8 schools. Mrs. Whalen may have some other suggestions, but that's usually the average that I think is manageable and makes sense for most families. But making sure that you keep track, because not every school follows the same time frame. And so you don't want to miss an important deadline. And then, you know, obviously making sure that as you research, keeping track of what you like and what you have questions about, or maybe things that don't seem as exciting to some of those schools that you're considering. That pro-con list will come into play, particularly when you start to connect with schools either virtually or in person. It's going to get confusing and memories are going to jumble together. So keeping a fresh log of what you really enjoyed about conversations you've had or experiences you've had, and maybe things that you're questioning about that particular environment in college, that will be important to you. And then the last bullet is about demonstrated interest. So in our world, in our industry, we do consider some students what we call stealth applicants. And you're probably wondering, what in the world does that mean? If we were in an audience together, I would call on you like a teacher to ask what you thought it was. But as a stealth applicant, this is essentially a student that we have not heard from, that we've had no communication with until they've applied. And so we're excited that they've applied. But for many schools, because of how easy it is to apply now through the Common Application or the Coalition application, or maybe some of these faster apps that schools will provide to students, more and more students are applying to more and more schools. So helping us understand what students are really serious about hearing from us and what aren't, that can be complicated and complex. So when we've only seen a student for the first time as an applicant, we may be a little hesitant to provide that offer of admission until we learn a little bit more about that student. So try not to be the stealth applicant, try to connect with the schools in different ways prior to the application. So let's talk about those connections. We know that we're in a sort of a new normal now, that you may not be able to actually talk to somebody in person and shake their hand and connect. And so many schools around the country, and I know some of you have probably already taken advantage of these, have developed wonderful programming and options through virtual connections. I know it's not the best replacement, and it's not the same experience of being on a campus, but it's the closest we're going to be able to do until you're ready or able to visit those campuses or have those one-on-one connections. So a couple of resources that I really recommend. Each individual school website will have their own version of how they want to introduce their campus. It may be through their YouTube channel, which you can subscribe to so you get updates, or they may even work with uvisit.com, as I mentioned here, that has incredibly in-depth, high-res, 360 views of their campus, and actually doing a virtual campus tour, walking around and taking steps into buildings and hearing videos and stories as you do that. Wooster has the uVisit campus tour, and we've actually taken that to the next level where students can register for a Zoom experience like this, and we have live current students, at least 2, walk you around using that tool, but you get to hear from them live and ask them questions live. So know that schools are being very creative with these virtual connections. So if you can't visit, or I can't visit you at Pine Richland, take advantage of the virtual connections, because we will keep track of that opportunity and hopefully collect your information before or after that event so we can stay in touch with you, and that's a way to demonstrate interest. The one thing I've noticed at Wooster is this summer, we haven't had as many students take advantage of interviews. In the summer, it's very popular for students to visit, and part of that visit is they sit one-on-one with us in an interview, and it's a wonderful way to enhance your application by having that one-on-one conversation where we can share those stories in a summary as part of your file. And what's interesting, I think, because you're not visiting most schools and you don't have this opportunity, you're probably more hesitant to take advantage of a virtual interview. And so my big advice is stand out by asking for a virtual interview, because I don't think a lot of students are doing it right now. And so if you do that, it's an opportunity to make a connection with an admissions representative. It may be a student, it may be one of us, and to share your interest in that school, but certainly share a little bit more about yourself. So that's my big tip for virtual connections. So this is a very recent picture of Wooster's campus, and notice the tour and the tour guide and our families. So some campuses have started to open up again, and Wooster did at the end of May, and we are offering individual visits and individual tours, although that's what we've always done. But we want to make sure that you feel safe and comfortable walking around our campuses if you do choose to travel and visit campus. So know that this is the revised experience, at least for now, and probably through the fall for most of you, that if you do decide to travel and visit a campus, know that we're all taking the precautions and following guidelines that we need to within our state and national guidelines to keep you safe. But know that it's going to be different. For instance, with the campus visit, this would have been the slide I would have shown you back in the spring before the pandemic, where I'm like, okay, wherever you may be in the process, especially as a rising senior or as a senior in the fall, when you visit, you should take full advantage of going to class, maybe even spending the night on campus in one of the residence halls. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't think that's all going to be possible this fall. You know, I think that those experiences, they'll vary depending on the campus and their decisions, but it's going to be very few and far between where you'll have that same exposure and or level of engagement. So we're going to revise that, but certainly do the best we can for you to get a feel for the campus community when you visit. So here are just some good guidelines to keep in mind. And then when you are visiting or when you're on a virtual presentation where you can use the Q&A box as we ask you to do here, or if you're actually on the phone and talking with an admissions counselor, there are some of those tougher questions that I love to share with families that keep in your back pocket that are going to help you really understand a little bit more about how colleges support student success, how they're there for you as an individual, and being able to assess that from college to college and knowing what's going to fit you best as an individual. So these are some of my favorite questions that help you understand retention. You know, seeing a student come in as a freshman, how many of them return as a sophomore? I think that says a lot about a school in terms of how they nurture and how they help students transition in that first year and feeling confident going into the second year. And then many of the websites that you review, even Big Future, they typically will report on a 6-year graduation rate. Well, I know that most of you on the call are probably saying, wait, I want my son or daughter to graduate in 4 years, not 5 or 6. So I think it's important to ask that question. Okay, I know what your 6-year graduation rate is, but what is your 4-year? And so understanding how students are moving through the experience and graduating on time as expected or anticipated. Obviously, it's important to know a little bit more about advising, if that certainly is important to you, to know how often you get to connect, to talk about your trajectory in college and decisions that you're making, as well as career options and guiding you through experiential learning opportunities like internships. As part of the financial planning model, you want to know, okay, I have an idea of what it's going to cost my first year, but what have you typically seen in tuition increases over the over multiple years, so I can anticipate what those increases will be for my family and me, and how we can finance that. And then my last one is, one that, believe it or not, some schools I think have difficulty talking about how they are different than other institutions, because when you start looking at schools that are similar in size or similar with programs, sometimes it's really hard to understand what makes them different and does that speak to you. But I think it's good just to be upfront and direct and say, okay, I'm looking at these 3 schools. What makes you different? And I think that's important to hear how they represent themselves and how confident they are in that and who they are. And so I'm really proud to be a part of an institution that is proud of who it is and what it represents in terms of the research experiences in our global campus community that our students benefit from. And I added this slide in, Mrs. Whalen. I know we didn't look at this earlier, but I thought, it is also important to think about how the pandemic has changed the college environment and how the colleges and universities have responded to that crisis. Because I think it's important to know as a family, how did the college respond in March or in April when they had to send students home, and how did they support those students through the process, both emotionally as well as academically, but also financially? And how have they started to think about the fall, and what are they doing to keep their community members safe? These are all good things to look at, and because I think it is then representative of any experience or any challenge or crisis that they may run into, whether that's an individual student and helping them work through their own crisis, or obviously something more global. So every college should now have a COVID-19 response or fall plans website or web pages within their site. Once you start looking at different individual colleges, see how they responded, see how they communicated with their parents and their students and their community members. And then I also think it's good to know, how did they support the students financially for those that really went through and probably still are some significant changes in their financial circumstances as a family. Here at Wooster, we created response grants to help students, to support them through this time if their family members had been furloughed or lost a job. So keep that in mind as well. And then I think it's really important to hear, how did the college, how did the pandemic affect the college financially? Have they had to make some significant changes in academic programs or staffing? And how will they weather through that storm? Because that shows you how fiscally healthy the institution is, and also the leadership decisions that they make. There could be a whole other hour on financial planning, so I promise I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I just wanted to share some websites or steps that you can take to learn more about financial planning. So we can certainly answer any questions that you may have tonight, but I did want to share that, again, free resources where you don't have to pay somebody to help you get the best financial aid package. Know that the government site actually has some really great resources and explanations on the different types of aid and how to go about it. Mrs. Whalen, do you have any advice or thoughts that you wanted to add?
Well, just like we couldn't forecast 2008 when the stock market nearly crashed, this was hard to forecast. So I think no matter what community you live in, it's very helpful to have that very uncomfortable conversation at home about cost of attendance. So it's helpful to ask your parents now. So if you're a student watching this, no matter what grade you're in, it's important to just ask, hey, mom and dad, I attended college planning night, or, I spoke to Mrs. Whalen, and what are our family plans for paying for college? You need to know, are you taking out student loans? Are they going to be, private student loans? Is someone helping you in the family? Are your grandparents helping? Because that way you're not spending too much time researching uber expensive colleges and universities. Jen, what was the price I think they said on NACAC for the cost of University of Chicago this coming year? I think it broke a record. It's going to be in like 6 figures per year. And obviously, Jen and I would both agree what a fantastic school that is. But if you're getting a degree in business, you might want to really weigh that. Is that something, $100,000 a year, that your family is willing to pay? Mm-hmm. So these are conversations, though, to have now, whether you're a freshman, sophomore, or junior going into your senior year, because instead of getting your hopes up on a full scholarship, in the last, I would say 5 to 6 years, there are less and less full scholarships available, not because colleges aren't awarding scholarships, but because colleges are trying to give more students money instead of just a few. So mm-hmm. Instead giving 1 or 2 kids a full ride, they'll sprinkle that out to multiple kids. And so it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. But again, when it comes to financial aid, just a reminder, I'm having financial aid night the very beginning of October. You could find that information on your junior or senior year timeline. But for tonight's purpose, I want you to start that conversation now so that you have a realistic vision of what college costs and what your parents can help you with. Thanks, Jen.
No, that's great. Thank you. This could also be a separate session, so I just wanted to share just some sort of tips or takeaways for those of you in the audience that are looking at potentially participating in intercollegiate athletics at the college level, because I do find that it can sometimes take over a student's college search. And so I want you to find a good balance, right? I want you to get excited when a coach comes to one of your games or showcase to scout you and to connect with you. But I also want you to say, is that the college for me if I get hurt and I can't play? So I think that, really thinking about how is that sport impacting your college goals and your career goals overall? What level of commitment do I see myself giving if I do participate in athletics? And that will help, and having those, again, less comfortable conversations with your current coach, with your parents, really getting a sense of what fits right for me in terms of what I see my college experience being. And it's not just about getting that scholarship and getting on the roster spot. I think that's important to have that conversation early. And that will help sort of drive what your priorities are as you continue to hear from coaches and as you continue to explore schools and find a team that connects with you. It's also about what college is going to connect with you best. And so learning a little bit more about what it is to be a student athlete, understanding the eligibility center. So spending some time with the NCAA site, understanding the differences between how you can communicate and how coaches can communicate to you, whether you're going to Division I through Division III, and also, again, being active and proactive about your experience. So making sure that you're not only talking to the admissions office and demonstrating interest there, but if you go to an athletics website, like if you go to Wooster's website now, there's a recruit questionnaire that you can complete as a sophomore if you wanted to, saying, I might play men's lacrosse or women's tennis when I go to college. I'd like to learn more about your program. And that demonstrates, again, that interest and starts that communication early. So taking advantage of being proactive and considering how you want to invest your time and your resources in different tournaments or showcases. But whole other conversation, but know that we're here to support you through that process and can help you with that. So just some final quick thoughts for our parents. Obviously, I hope that one of the messages that resonated throughout tonight was, we understand that this is a complex process. It can bring lots of joy, but also lots of anxiety to the family. We want to make it manageable. It can be an exciting process and a happy process. Think about all that time in the car together when you're traveling to visit schools, all that good quality time as a family. But really thinking about and trying to ignore, and I call it the Starbucks syndrome. I've had families tell me how they're standing in line at Starbucks and they hear the mother in front of them talking about the college search and, oh, well, my daughter got into Amherst and we're thinking about Boston University and and you start to feel sort of that anxiety lift up and you're thinking, okay, what are we missing? What do we need to do? Maybe we should look at that school, and trying to step back from that, right? Maybe not focusing on the social media posts of what other families are doing and really focus on your child and what's going to be best for them in terms of what school environment is going to help them step out of their comfort zone in lots of different ways, but also be happy and be successful and not be stressed out all the time. So trying to resist looking at just the rankings alone or just selectivity, and looking for the schools that are going to be the best fit for your child to be successful. And then I know it is a process for the family. We recognize that the parents have an important role in this process, but we want you to help us empower the students, because as soon as those students enroll and deposit, the college is only going to start talking to the student. And I'm learning that now this summer as our incoming class, the parents are like, I'm not getting an email. What's going on? I don't know what's going on. I'm like, that's what happens. Students become young adults and have to learn that they're on their own to an extent when they're in college. So helping to empower them now, giving them that responsibility to take those steps, to complete the application, to write and draft their essay for your feedback, to make the appointment with Mrs. Whalen on their own, having those opportunities. But also, I think it's important for the students to know that they can help, you can set ground rules as a family that they need to realize your part of the equation, and obviously a very important part of the equation. And believe it or not, they're really going to entrust you in that process and really rely on you. So finding that delicate balance will be important. And then, of course, students, we want you to be confident in this process. We want you to feel that you can be yourself and be honest. Keep an open mind about, looking at schools that maybe you didn't quite think were going to be on the list, but Mrs. Whalen thought it would be a good match. So, taking some time to research the schools that perhaps weren't on that immediate list. And also understanding that it's not where you go, but it's what you do at any college that you attend is really what's going to make that impact and help you have a successful life and an enjoyable time after college as well. So keep in mind, this is your process. It's a chance for you to really help shape your future, and it's your own individual future. We can't prepackage that for you. So that was it in the nutshell. I know that we could, talk for many more minutes about any particular item, whether it's the application process, the essay, the FAFSA, but we wanted to just give a nice overview of what to think about and help you start to formulate some of those questions and take those first initial steps. I don't think I see any questions from the group yet.
I don't see any.
We can give you a couple, a minute or two in case you have any that you want to add to the forum. But otherwise, Mrs. Whalen, what would be the next step from your own perspective and your time frame for these families?
So I think no matter what grade you're in, I think one of the things that you're always in charge of 100% of the time is your own personality and character. And that actually impacts college admissions. My juniors that are going to be seniors are realizing that as they ask teachers for letters of recommendation. Teachers aren't writing about the grade that you got in junior year in your class or the grade you got in sophomore year. They're actually writing about how you were within the confines of that classroom. So remember, there's a lot in this process that you actually control 100%. Many of you, and I understand this as a parent myself, are so worried about your numbers, your GPA, your SAT, ACT scores, but you're forgetting that colleges will review you. Most colleges are going to review you holistically. So they're going to look at that information. They're going to look at the decisions you made in academic planning. They're going to look at, for example, if you're a junior, what classes did you sign up for senior year? It says a little bit about you. Did you continue to challenge yourself, or you didn't continue to challenge yourself? What do your teachers write about you? You actually control that. Were you outstanding in the classroom? I've read some teacher letters that are absolutely amazing. I've had teachers write about a student that it was such a pleasure to have them in the classroom, that they actually made the class a better place to learn just by their interaction with not just the teacher, but their classmates. Mm-hmm. Learning happens in many different ways. And so don't get stuck on the number game, like my numbers are this, my numbers are that. Work on the choices that you're making also outside of school. I've spoken to kids at Pine Ridgeland that have unbelievable stories to tell about working at our local food vendor, which is Giant Eagle, Jen, in this area. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it is amazing. It is amazing. So, or maybe you volunteered, or maybe you were doing virtual lessons because you have a talent in a subject or a talent in music. So it's your story to tell. And that's the hard part. Someone like myself or your school counselor can't tell you if you do these activities, you're going to get in. No, the whole thing is when Jen reads your application, what did you choose to participate in tells a lot about you. And sometimes, honestly, kids, it can be very simple. On a resume, it could be something as simple as, I spent a large part of the pandemic finally reading for fun because I actually had the opportunity to do so. And then you could go on to tell Jen, you know, on your resume that, you know, you're a big mystery reader and these are the lists of the books that you were able to complete. There's so many things that are interesting about you that no one knows, including the people that work at your school, unless you're willing to share that. So don't just get stuck on what classes you're taking and what your grades are. I'd like to challenge you. If a stranger read your resume, what would they think of you? Are you just doing what you think is a great activity, or does it say something about your personality? If anyone's in this tonight that's in my 9th grade student government, I'm your co-sponsor. We have a very small group, but in that group, you're all hard workers. And I could write something great about all of you right now. So think about that in any club or activity that you are in. If you quit today, would that advisor miss you? You need to think about that. Would the person in charge of that club or activity actually miss you?
That's a good way to look at it for sure.
Right. That's just something to think about. So we have questions, Jen?
We do. I can take the first one. So Katie asked about the common application and how it works, and specifically about the essays. So, and Jean, feel free to jump in, but you know, what I love about the common application now is that you can start today on the common application and on your profile, and know that once the system updates and the new application is live and ready in August, that all that information can roll over. So if you wanted to be eager and get on and involved in the Common App, you can do that now. But I don't think you have to. I don't want you to feel like you have to do that. You're going to have plenty of time. The application will be up and live and ready for students on August 1, or if not earlier. And what I love is they haven't changed the prompts. So the essay prompts are the same, and they are out there and publicly, even if you just wanted to Google Common Application essay prompts, to get an idea of what those options are and topics that you can consider. And so know as a Common Application member school, right? So there are how many? Over 700 now, Jean? I keep
over 800.
Okay, over 800 now, that schools are taking the Common Application as their own. We will accept, obviously, one of those prompts. Now, there are some other schools that will require an additional essay. Yes. I know Wooster is not one of them. You know, we just accept the one. But you will do all of that work and be able to basically upload that information when ready into your Common Application account. And when you feel like everything is finished and edited and proofed, you will send that all at once. And so, Jean, do you want to talk a little bit about those schools that require additional essays, if you have any tips for that?
So generally speaking, there's a wide variety of types of schools currently using the Common App. So even though our big semi-private, semi-state school, Penn State's on the Common App, you don't answer the Common App essay question for them.
Good reminder.
They'll answer a personal statement. Now the Common App added this year an optional additional question. You don't, no penalty if you don't answer it. And it's about, is there something during the COVID-19 time that you feel you would like to share with the college or university? So if, for example, this is just something I can think of as a parent, if during this time you lost an opportunity to play spring tennis, or you had to take on a lot of responsibilities at home because your parents were working all day, this is a good time to mention something like that. You don't have to write an essay, just mention it. But the colleges that usually have yet another essay are those highly selective. University of Chicago is an example. So you submit your essay, your Common App essay, to the University of Chicago, and then the supplemental, they call it, essay is available for you to complete. And of course, University of Chicago is known for it being a very unique question. It could be something like, What does the color orange mean to you? Yeah, wow, that's really out there, right? And that's because students that are attending the University of Chicago have the ability to pick the question. And so most colleges do not require supplemental. Some colleges require nothing, like WVU. Some colleges like the University of Pitt are all short answer. There's no essay requirement. So you won't know that till you create your account and you search for the colleges and you add them to the college list. And then each one of those requirements appears magically. Now remember, you can only have 20 colleges in the Common App, which you probably should not even have that many. But I'm just saying, so it's not like you can have 50 colleges in there, 20 colleges, and once you add them to your Common App, you'll see what the requirements are. Very, very important. Very.
Absolutely. Yeah, good. Our next question, and I appreciate it because it did make me realize I skipped an important bullet. The question is, going back to the tougher questions to ask, one of them was, asking directly the admissions representative, what makes this school different than the others that I'm looking at? And I really appreciate the question because you're saying, I'm a little surprised by that because I don't want to come across as being critical or in a negative way, particularly if it looked like I wasn't doing my own research and understanding a little bit more about the school. And so great point. Before you have a conversation with a representative, particularly before a college interview, you absolutely want to have those basic facts and figures in your head, and also understanding why you're even at that school in the first place. You don't have to know every single thing about that institution, but understanding why you're interested in that particular school, what helped you get that excited that you came to visit or have a virtual interview with them. So understanding a little bit about the school's characteristics, whether that's the size of the classroom, or you heard really good things about their physics program, or I had a friend who graduated that did great work with the musical theater there. Those are great answers, that you show that you've done some work and invested some time in understanding it. But I also think it's okay to say, I'm looking at schools and some of them look very similar on paper, right?
Yes,
I'm looking at Allegheny, I'm looking at Wooster, I'm looking at Juniata, and I'm saying, what makes them different? And
yes.
posing and putting that in the admissions representative's queue gives them an opportunity to really brag about what they think is different and really help you understand what they feel is distinctive, and does that speak to you? Do you get excited when you hear that answer? So I think there is a way to ask it, but very good point that you want to balance making sure you show excitement and investment in the school through that conversation. But absolutely, our goal is to be able to share more about our institution so you can decide if it's a good fit.
I think, Jen, that was really well put. And in my many years of hosting and traveling to, I can't even count how many college campuses I've been to around the United States. I'm going to say that in my experience, I have asked that question as an adult, and never once has anyone ever taken it, but anything but sincere. Oh, can you explain? I've actually told colleges and universities, this reminds me a little bit about this school. Can you explain what you think is the difference between your two schools? And Jen, it's exactly what you say. They're usually very excited to explain what they think the difference is. It's funny you should have said that, because that's the reaction I've actually experienced.
Yeah, good. So Jean, could you share a little bit about your testing schedule? There's a question about if students take the PSAT as juniors. So I want to make sure I follow the Pine Richland schedule.
So at Pine Richland High School, all juniors must take the PSAT. So it's actually not optional. You will take the PSAT during the school day. And I have that date on the junior year timeline, which is on the high school website right now. And I did send it to you, so you have that as well. And the reason why you should spend some time this summer using something free like Khan Academy to practice is you're actually sitting for National Merit Scholarship money, which not only is extremely prestigious if you're a commended or a finalist, but you could win scholarship money. So one of the things that I'm always a little disappointed is when I proctor that test, I'll ask some kids just randomly, oh, how much did you study? And 99.9% of them say, I didn't study at all because it doesn't mean anything. But really, actually, it does. Colleges aren't going to get that score. But what I mean is that you're sitting for scholarship money, and it could help you in admissions if you end up being commended or a semifinalist or a finalist. And besides all of that, it gives you how you would do that date and time if you sat for a real SAT. So it's very helpful, actually. So if you put in the effort, I think you'll find it an important tool as one of the tools in your toolbox to help you get college ready.
Great, thank you. We have a question about the importance of summer activities. Is it critical to be able to share a story that you took a class in the summer, or that you engaged in an internship? I mean, how important is that to the college search? And again, I think this goes back to that comment I shared earlier, that I feel that you're under a lot of pressure, wanting to put your best foot forward and showing that you are multi-talented and engaged. And yes, absolutely, schools want to have students that are going to be good citizens and good community members on their campus. But how you showcase that and how you represent that is going to be unique to your own situation.
Right.
I think it's important to know that there are many schools out there that understand that some students, they have to work in the summer. They have to work to raise money to either help with expenses at home, or that's part of their college savings fund. And so make sure you talk about that. Add that to your list of activities, because that is an activity where you've engaged and learned a lot, but it's a commitment. And there may be people that have to stay at home because they have younger siblings where they have to take care of their siblings. Add that as an activity. Being one of the primary caretakers in your home and supporting your family that way, that's a way that you've invested your time and how you've grown. So it doesn't have to be a fancy writing workshop at, a fancy New England school. No. If that's what you can do and want to do, so be it. We will talk about it and learn more about what you've gotten out of that experience, but not everybody expects you to do those things. And especially not this summer. We know that everybody is very limited in what they can and can't do. And so I think that schools are going to be much more reasonable when it comes to understanding how you've spent your time. But it's probably going to be a pretty common question is, how did you, and it goes along with that question that Mrs. Whalen was talking about with the Common App, how did you adjust to being at home? What was that change like when you had to go to remote classes and do online learning? Or, how did your family have to respond? And so be prepared with those questions, but I don't want you to feel like you have to have summer enrichment and experiences to get into a good school.
Jen, if I could just briefly piggyback, colleges and universities are very well aware that not everyone and everyone's family can send them to, George Washington University in DC for a political science week. I myself never participated in anything like that. I always worked. But remember, with the internet, you have an opportunity to learn for free. YouTube is a great resource. As we go through summer, you could go on YouTube and learn calligraphy. You could pick up the guitar. Someone that's going to be a rising senior was telling me that they were taking music lessons for free on YouTube. So the question isn't what you did. The question is your choices with your free time. Are you helping other people? My family, we were very involved in the church. So I'm not saying that's you, but I'm saying it doesn't have to be fancy to be valuable. That would show a person that's never met me, something about my character. So that's what it's really about. It's not about what you do. It's about the choices you make and what does it show about you that someone doesn't know.
And I know that we've run out of time, but I will answer the last question. So thank you, Brianna, for asking the question about, does it matter if you want to base yourself in Pittsburgh after college? Is it better to go to a Pittsburgh regional school than an Ohio school or a place like UVA, as you mentioned in your question? And that's an interesting question, because I think it comes to about it. What it boils down to is your experiences and your connections and the networking that you create as a college student. That's really what's going to really help make the difference. Is what did you take advantage of in college? How did you do in class? But even more importantly, sometimes, how did you take what you learned in class and really start to practice or to explore different careers and take advantage of opportunities for civic engagement or internships or mentoring experiences or other experiential learning opportunities that your college provided? So find the school that is going to be the best fit for you. But one of those tougher questions I added was, how do they support you in that career exploration and those experiences that you can then represent well on a resume? So whether you went to Pitt and, and wanted to live in Chicago or went to school in Chicago and come back to Pitt, it's really about your resume and those experiences that you've had. But while you're there, it's good to take advantage of alumni connections and making, building relationships with alumni that feel very loyal to those institutions that perhaps, like for instance, we have a strong alumni base of Wooster graduates in Pittsburgh. They have happy hours together. They support us through National Interview Day and interview our future students. They're very involved. And so they're part of that networking with helping students get internships at PNC Bank or with UPMC. And so know that that alumni network is going to be strong no matter what school you go to within a particular city. So that's a good question to ask when you're exploring. I don't know if you have anything else for that, Mrs. Whalen.
Well, I'm just going to say that the same, for national companies, the same jobs are posted publicly. So you have the right at the end of your junior year in college or the beginning of your senior year to start applying for the same jobs, like federal government jobs. Mm-hmm. Matter if you want to work for the federal government, I can tell you, since my daughter does, that it doesn't matter what school you go to, everyone's applying to that job. It's posted. And so most of these jobs are posted. And then Jen had mentioned something else. Internships in college are very important, and those are public and posted. And so you want to take advantage of that as well, because many times that might lead to a future job offer. So, if you go out of state to college, but you have a summer internship here in Pittsburgh, that could lead to a job offer. So I hope that helps.
Yeah. Well, hey, it was wonderful to have you all here tonight with us. And Mrs. Whalen, thanks for having Wooster and me. It's always a pleasure. And we're going to post this recording in a space where you can access it easily. And as you can see, you have my email and phone. So should you have any follow-up questions for me directly, you know how to reach me. All right. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jen. I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Stay safe. Bye-bye.